Mr. Speaker, sir, in answering the question, I'd like to first of all start by congratulating you on your election as the Speaker of the House, and we look forward to continuing to work in the House under your guidance and under your supervision. In response to the question raised by the Honourable Charlie, I think the question basically has two components. The first component is about how government, or in particular the authorities that we have established to look after these areas, are responding to complaints on things like road conditions, wharf, jetties, which actually falls under my portfolio, which is carried out by the Fiji Roads Authority. And the other component is on cell phone towers, which is not really part of my ministry, it's part of communications, but we know that cell phone towers are something that the Vodafone and Digicel do at their own behest. I am not fully aware if the Ministry of Communications has programs to try to, or how it works with those two companies on addressing those issues. So I'll address the first bit first. In terms of complaints that come in relation to road conditions, wharf and jetties and so forth, the Fiji Roads Authority has that responsibility to deal with them. And on average, it has its own systems, and what the Fiji Roads Authority tries to do, it tries to deal with as many complaints as possible within 48 hours. So they have a timeline. You receive the complaints, you log them in, and within 48 hours, you try to address these complaints. So they have a whole a department where they have customer service representatives whose job it is to receive these complaints, to farm them out to the various departments within the authority to address the complaints. One of the initiatives right now that they have at the moment is to increase the number of customer service representatives they have on hand to deal with the volume complaints that come through. And the intent of the customer service representative team is to close all the service requests that are made to them. And this is a major key performance indicator for the Fiji Roads Authority. A number of complaints and how well they're able to close these complaints. FRA has a system of tracking the response time. So they have data on how many of these complaints they're able to address within 48 hours and what percentage of these tend to take longer. In order to address this further, they have made some internal changes. Now, when complaints are made, they are also reported directly to the Chief Executive Officer. So right at the very top of the organization, there's a focus on addressing these complaints. Once the Chief Executive Officer gets those complaints, he then in turn directs his staff to assess the complaints and make recommendations to his office on how these things can be addressed. Every week, there's a weekly summary of all the service reports. They're all submitted to the CEO for the tracking purposes to ensure that all the complaints are addressed. And there has been some good progress as a result of this, as a result of the process that they have. At the end of 2017, FRA had approximately 9,000 service requests at the end of 2017. By the end of 2018, they had been able to reduce that down to 6,100. So there's about 30% of the service requests had been addressed. At the end of January 2019, there were only 4,400 service requests that were still open. That's a reduction of more than 50% in the last 2 years. In addition to the service request that has been addressed by FRA, they have also been sending out teams out to the islands. They have sent a team out to Ngau to work on damaged infrastructure. A second team will leave for Lakemba on the 15th of February to work on the road and the jetty in Tumbo, which needs some work. Works on this jetty is expected to be completed in early March. So there's also teams that are going out to the various islands in Fiji. Just to talk a bit more, I know there's a lot of concern. A lot of members are always talking about jetties and rivers, jetties and roads around the island. I know the Honourable Ron is always talking about the jetty in Vonombalabu. There's around 15 islands that we need to address when you're talking about jetties and roads. Riria, Mapangai, Rutuma, Ngau, Matuku, Taviuni, Kandavu, Moala, Totoya, Koro, Obalau, Vonombalabu, Lakemba, Rambi, and Yasawa. Now, traditionally, the way that we've managed the assets of FRA on these islands, whether they are roads and jetties, has been through the central, northern, and western maintenance contracts that were carried out on Viti level and Vono level. Operating on these outer islands has its particular challenges. One, because of logistics. Obviously, there's going to be problems around logistics and transporting equipment, transporting manpower, transporting materials. There's always a problem also of weather conditions and the availability of resources. Recently, I was on the island of Kandavu, having a look at the road that is being developed from Vunisei, going up to, I think, to Wadalea, and the road down from Tavuki to go down to Yahweh, the end of Yahweh. The big problem that we have there is raw materials. The raw materials that they're finding in Kandavu so far have not met the standard that FRA requires. So they've been looking for new sources of raw materials. I think one has been identified in Kiombo, in Namara. At the moment, the resources are being shipped from Suva for all the roads in Kandavu. So those sorts of things are always an issue. So there are issues around material supplies, which has meant that over the past 2 decades, a lot of the work has been either temporary or holding solution until you can get the right materials in place. So because of those sorts of difficulties, we've had accelerated depreciation of the assets that we have in terms of roading and so forth. That was at a rate that was much higher that you find here on the main islands in Viti level and Vono level. And because of this, the unit cost of the works that you do is far higher in the outer islands compared to the main islands. And a good example of this is the roads that we have in Ovalau, the deterioration of the road in Ovalau, or the deterioration of the jetties that we have. But in the work of the FRA back in 2017-18, they identified that new works and the maintenance of outer islands is something that they need to focus on. So there's a renewed emphasis, a renewed focus on new works and maintenance on the outer islands. As a result of this, the FRA has developed a new 4-year capital improvement and maintenance program. And there's a tender for a contract to implement this program, and it'll be going out to market of Feb so that the work can commence. And with this new capital improvement maintenance contract, it will focus on delivering major improvement works across the islands, including major road upgrades, new bridges, and crossing replacements. And a major focus of the capital improvement programs will be the replacement of many of the aging jetties servicing the outer islands. Many of these are quite old, but there is now a focus to do this. This new capital improvement and maintenance contract will also deliver a more coherent and a quality-driven maintenance program throughout the islands, and this will be overseen by a new islands dedicated team within the FRA. So now FRA has set up a team that looks basically at just the outer islands, manages all of those works in terms of the work that needs to be done. That team the FRA will have a team of works manager and works inspectors that are based in the outer islands. So they're not going to be travel all the time from Suva, they'll actually be in the islands. So when I was in Kandavu in December, there's actually an FRA worker there who's reviewing all the work that is being undertaken to make sure that it meets the requirements that we have, and for monitors to ensure that we have compliance with the quality standards and all the program requirements that we have. So I think those are some of the developments that we are taking. I've talked about the approaches that have been used in the past and the proactive approaches that are being taken now to try to minimize the number of complaints that come in the future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.